Our first reader tonight is Will Clark, a graduating poet of the New Writers Project. Will is used to being front and center, whether it be leading the charge for the biggest horse parade in Mongolia last August, or as lead poetry editor for Bat City Review. Whether in his writing seen in places such as Smoking Glue Gun, Iconograph Magazine, and Berkeley Poetry Review, or out in front of the 11,125 horses and their riders for that world's biggest horse parade, Will is ahead of the galloping. Sadly, he's leaving this fine city real soon, tomorrow. But let's woohoo right now for the poetry stylings of my dear friend Will Clark.
Hey everybody. I'm going to first read a few poems from a manuscript that I just finished. It's called Dream Personae. The first one is called The Drunkard. There is something seething in me that turns the calmest sea into a tsunami. The placid waters stir and rock, bruised waves climb and rear up, tower above me where I stand on the weak shore. The black frothy curl slaps down, engulfs and drowns me. And if I come across even the most faintly smoldering pile of ash, soon it pops and whistles, the hearthstones split, blue and red flames shoot skyward in vascular bursts, and my stoked skin combusts. If I so much as glance at the large bell mounted on the high mountaintop, it resonates uncontrollably, madly ringing everyone's ears, and the earth churns and buckles. I sprint blind through the ruckus streets until I collapse, hands shaking, forehead dashed upon the stones, the tonnage of my mind made inside out. The witness. The foot lands where first the thought fails. Hate grows within one of two conjoined opposites. The burgeoning seed has become arrested with illness until only inactive acorns litter the irresolute ground. Smaller gears chafe and strip the larger gears and fall away. Pain crashes through the body and rears up like some stark stare upon a deliberately ruined land. The time traveler. A rich gray-red volcanic soil is flung across my eyes. Wind-blown wisps and seeds land and attach hair-like roots to my pupils, like forgotten, yearned-for things, absorbing the moisture from tangled thoughts. Up sprouts a green fur of growth that wrests control for itself the agency of time's dilation and constriction, or that there is an alterable flux of blood underneath every surface, mirroring the heat of focus directed upon it. The sleepwalker. As in a young child running in a parkland, playfully ducking behind a mute tree, without thought, fists momentarily clenched, the molecular residue of the immediate past spins and recycles back as the immediate future like a rotating spit, a magnifier until only the wheeling sun above, inveterate plasmic millstone, intern pupil grinding and pulverizing, engorged bladder, punctured yolk, affects the demise of self-summation. And the rest of the poems are newer. The new limb. There's a certain place in the city by the bay that never fails to induce in me an overpowering sense of deja vu. I hesitate to describe it or even mention its location, the little park where two streets converge in a V-shaped angle, out of fear that the mere effort to remember the spot would induce another such potent episode. I discovered the phenomenon when I first moved to the city, walking down the long avenues, familiarizing myself with the locations of various shops and services in the neighborhood should I need them. From a distance, I noticed where several groups of people were sitting out at the small wooden tables clustered together, drinking tea and coffee from little clay cups, and eating little sandwiches and cakes served on small wooden platters. A face suddenly upturned with laughter. Children were racing little balsa wood sailboats from one end of the pond to the other. The sun reflected blindingly in windows that seemed to vibrate from its pale force. The sky was white with morning mist. A cloud of pigeons careened from side to side, then suddenly upward, gray and white wing flash coupled with the sun glare, and something decoupled in my memory. I had somehow been there, in that little park, innumerable times before. I felt it must be true, even though I had only first stepped foot in the city just the day before. Tall Japanese maples with leaves on their branch tips already reddening, sycamores and sparrows, the spiral of one thought into another, memory unmoored from the remembered, the sudden sense that things exist in exactly 12 layers, confusion caused solely by their simple but constant overlapping. The sense that my future life already felt like a past life, but lacking a sustainable belief in either one. The illusion of constant renewal. I did not fully discover myself again until I'd walked past the kite-shaped park all the way to the sea walk where the cold gray ocean waves heaved and beat against the immobile latticework of stones. Quite a long time passed before I returned to Little Park. It was late spring when I suddenly had occasion to wander the streets with very little thought to where I was going, dumbstruck. A source of grief I do not wish to talk about had just hours before entered my life without warning. When I approached the little park, the very same profound deja vu occurred again. Same trees and pond, different cafe goers and children racing their boats, different boats even, but this time I welcomed the odd, dislodging sensation. I let it flow through me as if it were some reward I deserved. In fact, I quickly grew addicted to the sensation. I returned to the park as often as I could. But I could not have foreseen how over time, years perhaps, it somehow sprouted in me something appendage-like. I could feel it invisibly groping and feeling with some agency unto itself, though I knew not from what substance it was made. Soon I could not distinguish anymore the difference between its hunger and my own. We bled together, shared some similar lung. At first, it seemed as though this new eyeless limb were of utmost importance, giving me something akin to a new sensory organ. Though eventually I would stay awake for hours at night while it slumbered, plotting as if it were actually possible to amputate it with my own hands, preferring to live instead with its pink punctured scar in me like a mouth sealed shut. San Francisco Bay at daybreak. What category of brain caved in when the sun rose, when blue broke against the gulf between future and past, itself and the sight of itself? What soft tissues in golden shreds, ribbons, coagulates, reached for hard heat, gripped onto pooling white, phosphoric filament with its weak senses? What says the voice of hard compulsion to the ear of completion? What dawns upon the most achingly slow awareness, transition, most ancillary need? What is the regret in permanent day, permanent night, but that to have one means to hide the other, with some soft eye connecting the two, both vessel and radiative organ, all the components arranged so as to mask the components, illusory substance now the projector of both real object and concrete thought, as the rising sun limbs both black shore and hill crown. Hunger. The whole world is a chamber, pupil without iris or lens, possessed with true compulsion. The skies plummet toward an infinite small things, always in view of unguarded stars, tissues so large they can contain nothing. The sun in our blood, and that's S-U-N, sun. Stark blue dome, hillside grass, brown and red from the lowered sun. Below, miles-long waveforms, slow flecks on the shores. Then the sky, all 5 planets at once. Hidden canyon seep, where we dove and swam, but never could touch the night blue bottom of. The gray evening, swiping warm mosquitoes away from my arm that were rain droplets instead. The mindless motes that crawled all through our dreams and made us sweat and forget ourselves in cold deserts. The close coyote call that woke me, the injured rattle of his call also from my own throat and chest. And so rain the entire parched landscape with blood, let it further paint the red-tipped ocotillo. Let it soak into desert grass, into the canyons and caverns, and join the fluids of deep earth creeks and chutes. Let old gray oaks thirstily clench it up their trunks into their branches until each one stands with a new heart, reddened blooms of new muscle fluorescence, reaching for any good heat of their eyeless past. Just 2 more. The injury. I struck off a strip of bark and flesh along the base of a young tree accidentally while trimming the grass. At least half of its already narrow stem raked away, torn sinew yellowed, wet, frayed. The tree had stood for me a sign of material hope, it being my favorite species, blue oak. Its leaves so new, supple, green, when it shifted in the cottoned wind, it brimmed with summer's weave, fatty unguents and saps dappling every scent, sun, air, grass. And despite the injury, it still stands as if mindless of the wound, crusted now with brown stuff ants consume, and grackles grubbing at its roots. I was not careful enough. Yet knowing somehow the thread stuff of my mind, when I asked for its forgiveness, as if it had requested such an edit, it instead asked for mine. And this is the last one. Evening hour when the insects awaken. As if the axis mundi were not a place, but solely a time. We all emerge at once from the ground for all this buzzing around to be a kind of spreading. The raging elements of our wings, material made almost numinous. Thoughts only as wake as the earth, our needs almost entirely erased by the sensation of time passing through our wing joints. The weather has been good. We remember the precious things, eating face to face, warmer winds, touch of an unexpected, forgotten daybreak or nightfall, true calm of living in pairs, ideas that finally materially exist, friendly webs, attaining things without ownership. For how much we contain, we forget we are frail wisps, how complete the dark is. There are few reminders. Substance is most what it is not. But there is always great rhythm in how we light upon the trees and hands of things we cannot see. Thanks.